Hello, welcome to video 2, list of dog behaviors. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started going through the list of various dog behaviors that you may not like, but your dog doesn't see any problem of. So the first one is barking and howling. Barking and howling. Excessive barking and howling can get very annoying. And I don't know about you, I can't do barking and howling. And just a little bit of background on me. In 2016, I had a need for a service dog. And I actually had a need for a service dog back in 2004. But the information and how to do all that wasn't out there at that time. So when I tried to get the help I needed and get the questions answered that I had, they weren't there. There was no help and there was no answers. And so I made do, and I coped different ways. And so by 2016, though, the information was out there and the ability to get that information was there. And so with these dog behaviors that we're listing so far, some of these things you might not think are a big deal, and you might think, what is your problem? Why would you have a problem with that? Well, I can't do it. I'm ADHD, I'm OCD. I have very specific ways and very specific thought patterns. And so I can't do barking and I can't do howling. And as a service dog, they can't be barking and howling anyway. So we train no bark. Absolutely, under no circumstances. We don't allow whimpering, howling, barking whatsoever. So when I say these things, it's not like I'm trying to be down on you because you like to talk to your dog. Because I know some people do that, like, oh, what are you trying to say? And then the dog starts barking at you, and then you start encouraging it, and that might be you, and that might be fine. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about the excessive barking and howling that's not allowed in public and what to do about it if you don't like it. So you should put a stop on the behavior as soon as possible. Okay, well, that's her guidance. And then she gives a whole nother breakdown on how to do that. Honestly, I've had people ask me that question time and time again on actually the candidate I have right now. I picked her up as a rehome, and I said, she mentioned how she barked a lot. And I said, well, she won't. And she looked at me kind of odd, and I was like, we don't allow barking. That won't be tolerated. We don't do that. We just don't do that. And so how do we do no bark? Well, for no bark, we have them on leash. So if they are on leash, and when she only really exhibits the whimpering, she hasn't got to the point of barking, but the whimpering is if I leave her tethered outside. I want her to have the ability to get calm and get busy outside. And I don't necessarily walk them all the time in the yard. So I tether, and when I'm out in public or I'm out at the park or anywhere, anytime I can get the practice in for them to get busy on leash, I do it then. But at home, I tend to just let them tether. But I do listen, and I make sure I'm in within earshot. So if I catch her whimpering and barking, I will make my way to wherever she is, and I will wait until I actually hear her doing it, and then I will rush into the situation and correct it. But I always make sure I correct it within the 1.5 seconds. It's no use to try and correct barking, and it's been 30 seconds, a minute since she barked, because she has no connection between the two. So the on-leash correction is super important. It has to be within 1.5 seconds of the dog doing the barking or howling behavior. And then it's okay, now the dog's sitting. Dog's sitting quietly, and it's just looking at me like, right? And so you're waiting the 5 seconds, and then you're praising the dog. Good girl, good boy, that they've listened and they're sitting quietly. So that's the behavior you want to encourage. To just randomly run out there for barking and howling that happened not within 1.5 seconds, then it's of no use. Okay, the next behavior is digging. Digging is one that we get a lot of as well. They will tend to tell us that, it'll be on their info sheets, if it's an owner surrender, that they dig. And I don't worry about that one either. And you might say, why? Why don't you worry about that one? Well, some dog breeds just love to dig, and it's in their blood. But if your carpets or your garden are getting destroyed, you'll want to try to train your pooch to stop digging. How would I train my pooch to stop digging? That doesn't make any sense. Like, right, what, am I supposed to just run over there every time he's digging? I'm supposed to be watching him at all times? Well, Kinda. When I leave the dog tethered outside, and again, I don't leave the dog tethered outside for exorbitant amounts of time, and I'm literally, the window that he's at is usually right outside where I'm at. So I can hear the dog at all times. They're on rock, like I had mentioned before, so it's not a digging surface. And if a digging is a problem, then you shouldn't be tethering or keeping them located on something they can dig on, right? And then I didn't quite understand this one with the carpets. If the dog is digging on your carpet and it's tethered to you, that's a problem. Like, why are you letting the dog, while it's tethered to you, dig on your carpet? And if it's not tethered to you, then why is it not tethered to you? That's my answer. And a lot of times people just don't want that answer because honestly, they just don't want to put the work in to keep the dog tethered to them. And I think moms out there will get this, because when you're parenting, usually one parent will say, well, now you're grounded for a month. And the other parent will be like, great, now I'm grounded for a month, right? That's how that goes, because you are going to have to enforce that law, right? Well, that's the same thing here. In order for you to get the desired behavior from your dog, you also are going to have to be tethered to that dog, which means that you also are going to have to make sure and enforce all that correction at all times. But if you dedicate a month to getting the dog to where it needs to be, then you have a lifetime to enjoy it. But if you choose to just disregard any kind of training in the beginning, you're just creating bad habits that are going to be harder to break later. So we teach the command leave it. If you catch them digging, it's leave it. Usually with leave it, they will stop. At that point, you would give an on-leash correction, because that's something they should be on leash for and they should be corrected. And if you don't catch them in the act, then you need to put the leash on and then wait, because they probably will go back to digging, and then you can be able to correct them at that point. Praise at 5 seconds again. You're wanting to set them up for success. Leave them in an area where they're unable to dig and or cabled for shorter increments of time. Obviously, if they're out there long enough to be digging, that they shouldn't be out there that long, right? And if you feel like they didn't get busy, yet they were digging, crate them. You can kennel them at that point in time. They did not do the desired behavior that you were looking for, so crating them for a period of time to get them to restart, and understand that this is the behavior I need you to do in order for you to be out of the kennel and out of the tether outside. Then they will get, okay, this is what they want me to do, right? Okay, so the next behavior is chewing. Chewing is one of the most common problems when the object of your dog's attention are shoes, phone, clothes, etc. Learn how to limit the destruction. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, and he would be a great dog, except he just eats all of our dirty laundry, and he's constantly digging in the trash, and well, then don't let him run around your house to eat these things. Have him tethered to you. And quite honestly, that's not the answer anybody wants to hear. People have a really hard time with thinking that they have to have the dog tethered to them. And it is a leave it command. If you catch the dog within the 1.5 seconds of the chewing, and sometimes they're chewing on their paws or tail or whatever, and that's a definite no-no, because we don't want them doing that behavior in public. So it's a leave it command. Again, it's a correction with the correction collar on a leash. And then the praise at the 5 seconds. 1.5 seconds to correct, 5 seconds to praise. If the behavior continues after that, I would kennel. But I would kennel with a tether in sight or earshot, so you can hear or see that if they start digging or chewing, that you would be able to give the correction even in the kennel. So they need to understand that the behavior will isolate them, but it will not stop the correction. Because this is kind of like when you send your kid to its room and they have everything they could ever want in their room. Is really not a punishment. And if they're chewing and you send them to their room where there's nothing and no ability for you to correct, it's kind of like sending them to their room without any ability to do anything about anything. So they must be on leash to correct. It's a behavior that you want to correct before you're not home. So you're wanting to make sure that you're able to catch these things before you're not home. If they're a problem, you need to be watching for them when you're at home, because more than likely they're not just doing them when you're gone. Okay, the next behavior that we're looking for is play biting. And this is really common in puppies. As basic assistance dogs, we don't normally get puppies. We have gotten some that were within the 4 to 6 month range. We don't, oh, she unplugged my cord. Hold on. Yeah, she's holding my cord now. Sorry about that. The candidate's on the ground and she pulled out the cord. Okay. Play biting. So we haven't had very many puppies. I mean, I've raised puppies before, but as far as training and raising a puppy, it is extremely important that you can, pet on the dog's face, on their mouth, all that stuff. But usually when you start petting their face and their mouth, their jaws open and they start trying to gnaw on you, because puppies like to eat everything. Well, when they try to bite at you, play biting even, it's a no bite, or leave it, or no, whichever command you see fit at that time. Now, in the event that they actually catch you, you do want to try and make sure that you give a correction that's similar. They have canines, these sharp teeth right here. Yeah, they have them as well. One of the corrections that we have used in the past, I am passing on to my fosters to use, is in the event if there is a bite. Now, I'm talking puppies, okay? I'm not talking a vicious pit bull. I'm not saying that, like an adult pit bull or some kind of random, even small, any size dog. I'm not talking about an adult dog. I'm talking about a smaller dog that wouldn't really know better. An adult dog tends to not play bite. They tend to kind of understand that this is going to cause pain. So I'm not talking about that dog. I'm talking about a puppy. Let's just be clear. So I have done the lip to the canine, where you push the lip into the canine. So you would grab the muzzle from the top and you would push the lip into the canine, and it's a quick release. Okay. It would take a little practice. You might want to just practice it when you are just in a good place and there's no problem. But you can easily put your hand on the top of their mouth and you can easily stretch the lip over the canine. It's a quick reaction. It's a quick thing. It's just to get their attention on their mouth with a slight amount of pressure, so they understand that the pressure that they're giving to you in a biting form is inappropriate. Again, you have to catch it within the 1.5 seconds of happening. You have to give the correction if necessary. Like if you've done it once and with the leash and the correction collar and that's not responding, they're still not responding, then you would want to go to the lip to canine. Making sure you're always praising at the 5-second mark. And of course, kennel when you're not home, to make sure that you're correcting those behaviors at all times, okay? The next one is separation anxiety. I get this a lot, and I've had a few candidates that did have separation anxiety, that were very nervous and shy and timid dogs, especially because they come to us from the shelter and as rescues, and we don't know what their history's been. For those, dogs with separation anxiety will get nervous and destructive when their owners are away. So find ways to help your anxious canine deal with this issue. So what way would you find to help your anxious canine deal with this issue? Kennel work, if at home, on cable, then in another room with the cable. And we've been talking about this, having the tether on the dog loosely, not tight, but extending outside of the kennel, and to a point where you are not visible to the dog. So I have told people, if you are able to put the dog on one side of the door and then run the cable under the door, and then if you hear the dog barking or showing any signs of anxiety, you would be able to give the correction of no bark, and they would be able to understand that that's not okay. Even if you're not here, it's not okay. It's the best way for you to be able to give correction to the dog while you're not in the kennel with it or in its immediate vicinity, right? The other one is a lot of people will say to ignore the behavior. And again, if you see the dog and it's just, going nutso berserko because you're gone and you ignore it, it really doesn't change the fact that the dog is having the anxiety. It's just going to continue to get worse. It doesn't mean that, eventually it may happen that they calm down, but in the process, they're going to destroy your home. So to just leave them out and ignore the behavior is not really an answer. Always having a consistent routine. To have an inconsistent routine gives the dog an inability to know what to expect, and so it causes them to have more stress than they need. Let's see. Again with the cable. So that would be for separation anxiety. For urinating and defecating inside. Nobody wants a dog that's not housebroken, right? Eliminating inside the home can be a sign of a health problem if your dog is potty trained. Okay, so when we get our candidates for basic assistance dogs, we, again, have them with us at all times. So we monitor when they go out and when they get busy. We monitor when and how much and all that stuff. And then we bring them in on leash and they are tethered to us at all times, or they are kenneled. And a kennel isn't a bad thing. I know a lot of people hate a kennel. They feel like their dog is being isolated and it's such a torture chamber. And that's not the case. A kennel is a den. A kennel is a safe spot. A kennel gives the dog a moment that it can be on pause. Okay? Because the kenneling is still training. To be able to kennel without barking and having separation anxiety is training. So we are training the dog even when it's kenneled. It's learning that it has to have a calm behavior in its den. So that is training as well. So if you are having a problem with the dog not being housebroken in the house, you need to keep it kenneled when you're not at home, because you're just setting yourself up for failure otherwise. Within the first days of normal activity but preventable consistent potty, first thing before you leave and arriving and returning, before a meal, before bed. A lot of people do different things. I end up, first thing in the morning, I take mine out. If we're doing public access, first thing when we arrive at a location, I let them try to get busy. Once we leave the location, I try to let them get busy. Once we get home, I let them get busy. Once it's time for dinner time and I'm getting all their bowls and stuff ready, I let them outside to get busy. Once all the bowls are ready, I kennel them up with their food. I don't personally do another potty after they've been in their kennel and after they ate. And some people think that's terrible. I just feel they're full and they're calm and they're happy. Why am I going to wind them back up to go back outside to get busy and then not be in a calm, full, happy place that they just had after they eat? You know that feeling of, oh, you're full and you get tired, right? That's what we're trying to instill at nighttime. I'm not really wanting them to go get busy at that time. I know we as humans go potty before we go to bed, but I personally don't walk the dogs before I go to bed. I do have fosters and families that do that, and if you do that, that's totally fine. I'm just giving you what I do. Okay. Of course, all of these corrections can only happen if the dog is on leash. So you can't correct the dog by running after the dog, because that will cause the dog to run. Or you can't correct the dog by calling the dog to you and then correcting it. Because what you're telling them is, if I come to you, you're going to beat me. So they're not going to want to come to you. So that has the opposite effect. So the best way to give instantaneous correction is to have the dog there. Any other way of doing it will cause the dog to be confused as to what you're trying to teach it. I hope that makes sense. The next behavior that we're wanting to talk about is growling and biting. So for growling and biting are often signs of aggression. If your dog gets snappy at other animals or people, determine the cause and start training. Stop dog growling and biting before someone is seriously injured. Okay, I had the new candidate last night. It was in a controlled sit on the floor on the passenger side of the car. I went through the drive-thru at Del Taco. I had her introduced to my husband. She had no problem. I was just doing therapy visits today, and a man with a cap and pushing a great big cart. He was bringing the food over from the hospital side to the rehab side. So it was very loud. She let him approach her, no problem. But we were in the car last night and she was on the floorboard and the girl came to the drive-through window and then she barked. Like, what's going on? Why are you there? You know? And to allow that, you might think, well, that's not a big deal. Why are you tripping out about that? Because to allow that will allow slightly louder whining or barking, and then to allow slightly louder whining and barking will allow incessant barking that you then have to try and curb incessant barking. Again, it might not be a big deal to you, but you have to stop it where it is. It's a lot easier to pull up the tiny weed than to pull up a ginormous bush that's going to need to have some kind of truck pull it out of the ground, right? That's what I'm trying to instill in you guys. The best way to stop the no barking, the no growling, the no biting is to stop it immediately at any sign at all. And a lot of times, the meaning of that is, I don't think you can protect me at this time. I need to protect us because I don't think you're the alpha right now, and I'm protecting us by barking. And I immediately told her, no bark. I got this. I'm here. You know, I didn't say all that, but I said no bark, and that was what that meant. That meant I'm in charge. I got this. I don't need your help. And she immediately settled, which left her to feel, okay, she's got this. I don't have to boof because she's okay. Do you see the mindset? So now when that happens again, she maybe won't boof because she'll understand that I'm in charge and there's no need to protect me because I got this. If I don't say anything this time, but then the next time I say something, then it's like, well, now I have no idea. I don't know if she's in charge or not. This time she wasn't in charge, so I boofed. But that time she was in charge, so I didn't boof, and she corrected me. So then you're making the dog confused. It's your fault the dog's confused because you're causing confusion, and you may not even realize it. That's why we're trying to do these things. So you understand the mindset of the dog and the mindset of the correction. The consistency of the correction is everything. If we are inconsistent in our correction, that just causes the dog to have no idea what we're saying. And they already don't speak human and we don't speak dog. So the only way we can be communicating with them is through consistent actions consistently, right? Okay. So growling and biting. Again, still with the no bark, no, leave it. If they're biting, leave it. If they're growling, no bark. Verbal correction, obviously, correction chain, a tap. It has to be within the 1.5 seconds. The praise has to come 5 seconds later. Then, of course, if there is an aggression issue, you don't want your dog to be in a situation where they could act on that aggression issue. So you would want to sit for supervised pet, then praise. So keep controlled head of the pet's body must be on leash to correct. So it is extremely important that if your dog is showing any kind of aggression, you are even on more heightened of a mode that if people come and approach, or if you are out in any situation, that you are guarding your dog's head, that you are protecting the dog from anyone coming close so that you are in control and they know you're in control so that they have no need for the aggression. You have to exhibit calmness and you have to exhibit assertiveness. Because if you have anxiety and if you are not confident, the dog will sense that and the dog will react. And a lot of times when the dog is reacting, they're like, I don't know why they do this. It drives me crazy. I get so upset when they do this. And I go, so what you're saying to me is when the dog starts barking, you're already upset. Well, yes, I'm upset. And then I saw them coming and then I was just trying to get him out of the way. So before he even acted, you started getting upset. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And so your behavior, your change in emotions and feelings definitely, most definitely, absolutely is transferred to your dog. And when that is transferred to your dog, the dog will react to your lack of control. And to deal with your lack of control, it's going to get more aggressive because it's going to feel like I need to protect her because she doesn't got this. So be careful that you're not enforcing what you don't want. The next one is resource guarding. Your dog might think that there isn't enough food for them, so they guard it with their life. Now, a lot of times, I haven't had this happen in a very long, I can't even think of a dog I've had this happen with. But I know it happens. It's not like I think it's not a real thing. Same goes for toys and their place on the sofa. The fun stops when the dog gets possessive, aggressive, and starts to act out. Okay, so you have them, and like we said, we feed the dogs in their kennel. So they don't have to fear that someone's going to take their food in their kennel. That's their food. That's what they get. That's fine. I used to prescribe to the training of, I would line up my candidates and my service dogs, and everybody would get their bowl, and they'd be in a sit, and they'd have to wait until I told them they could eat. And then periodically during the time they were eating, I would pull away their food because I could. And I heard a behavior training that, what are you proving? That you're a big enough person that you can take the dog's food? And of course we don't want the dog getting aggressive if somebody tries to take their food, especially a little toddler comes up and somebody tries to take their food. Obviously we don't want that, right? Well, I tend to do training on the food thing a different way. So they get to eat their food. That's their food, their daily food. I don't mess with them with food. But I do a lot of training with food. And I guess you could also do it with the resource guarding for toys in the exact same way. So if we are on doing work, if he is in the candidate's in working position, it's tethered to me, I'm walking about the house, I go to the kitchen, I'm here, there, and everywhere. I go to the kitchen and I think, this would be a good time to practice resource guarding and making sure that they understand that they can't just have things, okay? They can't just take things, okay? So what I do is I will practice with a little bit of food, and I will drop it right in front of the dog. Now, a new candidate will immediately go for the food because they don't know any different, right? Well, at the immediate, before they get there, because you got to catch them in the 1.5 seconds, as they're going to get the food, I say, leave it, and I give a correction immediately. You have to do it immediately. Now, then they're confused. They're like, what just happened? Why can't I have this food? And so they will sit usually. Almost always I don't have a problem with them like demanding to get the food because they're in a working position. I'm already been working with them. They've already been following me around the house. They understand that they're supposed to stay with me and they're supposed to listen to my commands. So when I drop the food in front of them and I say leave it as they're trying to get it, they're understanding, okay, I can't have the food? Is that what's going on here? And so I wait the 5 seconds and we give them the praise and I pick up the food and we go about doing other stuff and I wait till they've forgotten about it, which is literally 1.5 seconds later. But I usually wait a little bit of time, maybe in a different part of the house, maybe on a different floor surface. And I drop food again, right in front of them. And I make sure that it doesn't look like I'm looking. Like you don't want to just like look like you're dropping it right in front of them. You want to make sure like they think that they're just doing this on their own. So I drop the food, but you're watching because you don't want to let them get the food. And again, if they try to go for the food, that's when you do the correction at the 1.5 seconds. Before they get the food, you got to correct. But if they don't, if they just sit and look at the food, then that's fantastic, right? That's good job, good girl. You don't give them the food then, okay? Because I can't. I know you want to. I know you feel like, well, then they deserve their ice cream cone at that point. Don't they deserve that candy then? Because I know you feel like I deserve good thing. I deserve a treat. That's not helping. That's not helping the situation. That's just telling them if I listen to her, she should give me food. If she doesn't give me food, then why am I listening to her? Right? So just give them praise. Pick up the food, go about your day. Okay, but you could do the same thing with a toy. If they have resource guarding with a toy, you don't want to wait till the time that they are in the midst of, they're down, you're not really working them, and they're in a relaxed position and they've got their toy and they're relaxing, and then all of a sudden you're deciding to just snatch their toy away. I understand that the children might do that and it's a good behavior to teach. Let's start with baby steps, okay? So wait till you're in a working position. Wait till they understand that they have to listen to you. Wait till that they know that they can connect with what you're saying, the command that you're giving, okay? So you could drop that toy again in the middle of whatever you're doing, and when they go for the toy, you say leave it. Okay, so this is going to teach them the same thing with the food as with this toy. So that if they had their toy and someone tried to grab their toy and they tried to get aggressive, you could say, leave it. And they would understand the connection without you having to stick your hand into a situation that might not be safe for you, or cause them to feel like they have no downtime. They were just having a downtime, and now you're taking their toy. What does that have to do with anything? Do you see what I'm saying? It's not like you're not teaching the resource guarding. You're just teaching it a way that they understand that it's a work-related command, that it's part of their work, so that even when they're not working, they will listen to it. Okay? So we're wanting to keep work and its commands to itself, and downtime and their things to their self. So when they're in their kennel and they're eating, that's their downtime. When they're sitting at your feet and they're chewing on their toy, that's their downtime. Really? It just seems, we're talking about treats and stuff, and I feel like I deserve it. Well, okay, the dog is already in downtime. It's been working with you all day. Let it have its toy. If you want to work on the leave it command, work on it when you're working. That's all I got to say about that. If you don't agree with me, you can always comment and we'll talk, okay? So the next one is rolling in dirt, poop, or dead animals. Again, the dead animals. We talked about this in video 1. Please just pick up your dead animals so there's just not dead animals where your dogs are. I can't stress that enough. Your dog shouldn't be rolling in dead animals. And if your comment to that is, well, I didn't know there were dead animals on the property where he was at. Well, then why do you have your dog in an area where you don't know where things are at? Couldn't there be other things there that you don't know where they're at? That would be my answer to that. So, unfortunately, I am slightly sarcastic. So, just pick up dead animals. And if you can't monitor that there's dead animals in the area that your dog is at, possibly that area is too big for your dog to be in without you being there. Okay, so rolling in dirt or poop. That one might be a little bit more hard, because if their area to get busy is in dirt, then you're having to make sure you're either walking them so they don't roll in the dirt, and you might think, well, what's wrong with rolling in dirt? Yeah, they'll get dirty, blah, blah, blah. There are parasites and things in dirt, and dirty things in dirt. Now, you may not think that's a big deal, but if your dog is service or your dog is therapy and it's rolling in dirt, and you take it to a therapy place or you take it out in public and it's got parasites growing on it, that's a problem. So we're wanting to make sure that our dogs stay as clean as possible. So rolling in dirt is not okay. Well, you can say, well, I take it to a groomer. I bathe it regularly. Do you roll in dirt regularly with the thought process of, I'll take a shower later? Yes, you keep your dog clean, but why allow the dog to be exposed to unnecessary parasites? Okay, that's what we're trying to get at. And the poop thing. They should not be rolling in poop. That should not happen. If you're finding that they're doing that, you need to monitor their time when they're outside getting busy. Especially because that sometimes, I think maybe we don't touch on it here. But there is we touch on it in video 3. The dog that eats the poop. And that's a whole other story. But sometimes they just want to mark. This one is a doggy favorite. Did you just bathe your dog and they're all clean and fresh? And be careful when you go outside, because some dogs hate getting baths as much as they hate the smell of their shampoo. And they prefer the natural odors such as dirt, poop, and dead animal. Roll on. So, I'm speaking to my fosters here. It's absolutely, completely inappropriate to let the dog roll in dirt, poop, or dead animals, period. Do not let the dog roll in poop, dirt, or dead animals, okay? If they don't like the smell of themselves being clean, we're not going to give them the opportunity to take it off. That's just what we're going to do. And let's see. Left her head back and back of the leash. I hate getting baths. Tether her head. Oh, that's just a note on how to bathe the dog. Some dogs hate getting baths. Note to self: if your dog does not like getting a bath, like you put it in the bathtub and it's starting to freak out, the groomers tend to be able to have the dogs when they're on the grooming table, and you could see this in some of the images that you could see if you look up a grooming table, where they're tethered at the front with a leash, and then they tether their rear right before their hindquarters, so there's their legs, and they tether them right here, so that both sides of their body are tethered. And you could do the same thing in the shower. Well, if you have like a bar or something that you could tether in. If you can't, then you might want to try and just create something outside. If it's too cold, then, you got to just be creative. Okay. So I always have my dogs to where they are, not able to move around, when I'm showering them, when I'm drying them, because our dogs are usually rescues and rehomes, and I don't know them, and I'm sorry, I don't trust them. And I'm not going to trust them with my hands or my face. So I always err on the side of protecting myself. So I would always want my fosters to err on the side of protecting themselves. Don't assume that this dog was super sweet and wonderful. I had a dog that was completely docile until I turned on the dryer. And literally this thing attacked the dryer, attacked it so fast and so quickly. By the time I pulled it, there was blood on the dryer. It had just gashed its teeth into the thing so fast that there was blood on the dryer. I was like, oh my God. I mean, no warning. So you don't know. And that was with him tethered. Thank God he was tethered. If he wasn't tethered, he would have attacked it, which was, of course, the dryer was in my hand. So always err on the side of protecting yourself, and it protects them too, because then they are not in a position where they can get loose and hurt themselves or hurt you or hurt, so, and stay safe. They're not going to get away. So we always want to make sure if they're not liking the bath that you keep them tethered on both ends of their body so that they're safe and you're safe. They need to be on leash or cable if they're rolling in dirt, poop, or dead animals. The area needs to be kept clean, free of dirt, poop, and dead animals. And of course, this is more work for you, right? We're saying that after the dog poops, you need to pick it up. We're saying that if there's dirt in the dog's area, you need to recreate the dog's area so there's not dirt that it's getting in and rolling in. And yeah, you should pick up the dead animals. Just saying. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Don't let it happen. Keep them tethered. Keep watch over them. Pick up the poop. Taking over your bed. I had a candidate go home with a family first night. Okay. And they decided to let the dog sleep in the bed with the girl, which was fine. I told them that was fine. But the way they let the dog sleep in the bed as long as the dog is tethered in a position so that it doesn't move, so it understands it has to stay in that spot. Okay, so with the cable tether, somehow you have it tethered to wherever it's at so it doesn't move, okay? They left it to sleep in the daughter's bed with the daughter because when they tried to put it into the kennel, the dog refused, is what they said. And I said, what do you mean it refused? It refused to get off the bed? Yeah, it didn't want to do that. It didn't want to get in the kennel. It didn't want to get off the bed. So you left it on the bed and didn't put it in the kennel? Yeah, we didn't. We just let it sleep with the daughter. Oh, so you gave the dog the bed and are letting your daughter, the dog is letting your daughter sleep in his bed. That's what's happening now. Because that's what that whole scenario just told the dog. I don't have to sleep in that kennel. This is my bed. I guess I have to let this girl sleep in my bed with me. And I guarantee at some point the dog will say, I don't want this girl to sleep in my bed. And it will become aggressive toward the daughter. And the problem with that is the dog was supposed to be service for the daughter. So the dog can't do its job if it doesn't know what its role is. And the dog doesn't know what its role is because you're not enforcing what its role is. The only way to enforce the role of the dog, being the dog that is a service, is to consistently correct and direct it to do the service that it already knows how to do. Our dogs have been given training to be assistance dogs. But if you take it into your home and choose to not continue with its assistance dog training, it will immediately revert into a pet. No questions asked. Has no problem doing that. Will do that immediately. Hence this situation. So you cannot let the dog rule your house, especially taking over your bed. It's your bed. Now the dog can sleep in your bed when you allow the dog to sleep in your bed. But if the dog chooses to not want to get out of the bed, at that moment, you can't allow the dog to sleep in your bed because it's then crossed the line and thought it was their bed, and now it has to sleep in its kennel. Until it gets past that point where he will respond to your verbal correction and go into its kennel on its own without a problem and leave the bed on its own without a problem, so that you know that it understands that you are the alpha, he is not the alpha, it's your bed, it's not his bed, and everybody is working copacetically. Does that make sense? I hope so, because that's a bad one, because that'll happen, and it'll happen really quick. Running away. Don't have this problem either. A lot of people, we received a candidate because the woman said every time she opened the gate, the dog busted out, and she'd be late to work because she had to go catch the dog and bring it and put it back in the yard. She just couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, okay, well, that's really not a problem for us because that's not allowed. We don't allow them to just run around, so they're not going to run away. And so certain breeds have a strong hunter instinct and are likely to run away when they spot their prey. Now, that is correct. I did have a Portuguese water dog that saw birds at Home Depot. I never had an issue with anything with this dog wanting to chase anything. We were walking in Home Depot one day in the garden section, and there was a pigeon walking on the ground. And this dog alerted and bolted, and it was tethered to me in a working position, so I kind of left with it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was an issue for this dog. So then it became an issue because I had to train through that. So you can't allow the dog, even though that's its breeding, it's its breed and strong hunter instincts, you're gonna have to consistently redirect that behavior, and you're gonna have to expose it, in increments to that behavior, with it staying in a sit-stay position and allowing the behavior around it, and knowing that you are in control, him being right there between your feet, not being able to move, and he's okay, and the situation's okay, until he calms down. And it could take a couple days, it could take weeks, it could take months. If you're consistent, it will work. If you're inconsistent, then he will be inconsistent in listening to you. So you have to be consistent. And as far as the running away, regardless of the breed, keep an eye on your four-legged lover boy during spring and fall when the females are in heat. Okay, all our dogs are fixed, or we require that our dogs be fixed after leaving the program. So some do need to be on leash at all times for their safety, and it's not a punishment. There were dogs that we did receive because of their breed, because of this very thing. Schnauzer is one. Another one is a Westie, West Highland Terrier. Another one would be, I have a Yorkshire Terrier. Mine aren't, because I'm very consistent with their training, but there are terrier breeds, because they are bred to hunt small prey, that once they see something, they just take off. And they don't think anything. It's just squirrel, 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 squirrel until they catch it, and then they have no idea where they are, right? So it is extremely important that some breeds that have that runner instinct are literally on leash at all times. That is not a punishment. It is not you being cruel to the dog. It is you looking out for the dog's well-being, because you know the dog's limitations and you love the dog. You love the dog enough to keep it safe. just like you should love your kids enough to keep them safe. So you should give them guidance and direction. Just the same with the dog. We give our dogs guidance and direction so that they can be safe, so that they can learn what they need to learn as assistance dogs, so they can be placed in a home where they can be acclimated easily into a family or into training as a service dog. So some breeds, yes, will need to be tethered at all times. Excessive licking. This is our last behavior. Excessive licking is often a sign of a health issue. Okay, so coconut oil. I prescribe by coconut oil. I get coconut oil all the time. Every candidate we have gets coconut oil. A bigger breed gets a tablespoon in their food. A smaller breed gets a teaspoon in their food. When it's cold and it turns into a rock, I hot water over the food when I put it in the bowl, so that part of it melts, and then I fill it up the rest of the way with cooler water so that it's able to drink. So it turns kind of into a soup with soupy coconut oil. Coconut oil is amazing for digestion. It's also amazing for their skin and their hair. So I have not had any dogs with hot spots, licking issues, food allergies even. We haven't had any dogs really with food allergies. If your dog is licking themselves, they might be injured or have an infection. Absolutely. You should make sure that you're checking and make sure that they don't have any of those things. If they lick everything and everyone, there might be a less obvious issue. Take your pooch to the vet to get to the bottom of it. There you go. If you feel the need that you need to take the dog to the vet because it's licking too many things, do so. You could also try, no, leave it. And you might find that it will just stop. And it was doing it because you let it. I know, it seems ridiculous. And you might feel or sense the sarcasm in my voice. But quite honestly, a lot of that behavior is just nervous boredom behavior. And they will lick and they will chew because there's nothing else to do. We do the exact same thing. We're bored, we get a bag of chips. They can't get a bag of chips, so they chew on their paw. It's the exact same thing. So leave it. You see them chewing on something, you see them licking on something, leave it. 1.5 seconds that they're doing it, praise within 5 seconds. How? On leash. You can't do it if they're not on leash. Basics doesn't allow. It's unacceptable in public. It is completely unacceptable in public for our dogs to be licking themselves. We can't do that. I don't ever want to see one of my fosters at a restaurant and just licking themselves under the table. That's not okay. So we don't allow it. And, it's something they can do when we're asleep in the middle of the night. I can't see it. I don't know what happened. I don't want to know. I don't want to know, and I don't want to see it. But when we're in public, don't even think about it. That's my philosophy. So that's the end of video 2. We will be going on to video 3, which is talking about body language and diagnosis. Okay, so that one is coming up next, and we will see you in a little bit. Talk to you later.